Streets and Infrastructure Committee meeting. Today we have on the agenda discussion of Quatman Avenue parking and discussion, that's the first thing on the agenda. The second thing is discussions of traffic patterns on Wesley Avenue and Marion Avenue and Ash Avenue. And the third item on the agenda would be discussions of a street plan. So we've got Mr. Geraci and Mr. Kelch with us today, and Mr. Bonzel's joining us today in the audience. Thank you for that. So I guess we'll open up the discussion. First item on the agenda, parking on Quatman Avenue. We have a resident, her name is Nicole Jones, and she is inquiring about having some parking on the opposite side of Quatman in between Homer and Fenwick. So I believe that's what we're talking about. So that's what our discussion is today, and at this time I'm going to open it up and see what we have to say about it. Does anybody have anything they want to say?
That's a little further down from Montgomery Road, if I'm not mistaken, kind of by where towards the apartments, the
Yes.
Trinity Apartments.
Yes, it is.
The issue is that they're parking on the wrong side of the street, like where there's not supposed to be parking.
No,
Or-
I believe the issue is that there's only parking on one side of Quatman, and some of the residents would like to park on the other side because I guess it's overcrowding, and some do not have driveways, and I don't have the exact street, how many driveways. So some houses are obviously have driveways and some don't. So I think Ms. Jones is inquiring that maybe we can see if it's allowed that we can have parking on the opposite side in between, what is that, Homer and Fenwick.
Yeah.
So that would be along the apartments there.
Okay.
And then the other portion would be along the seminary.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Just making sure I'm in the right area in my mind.
So we also have our fire chief here today, Mr. McCabe, and he might want to have a few things to say about this, but I don't know one way or another what to really say about this.
And I appreciate Assistant Chief McCabe for being here. I will say that the streets of Norwood weren't built for today's traffic. Glenside is one great example of a really small street, especially when you've got big apparatus coming through, such as a fire engine. Quatman's not as small as Glenside. I don't see a horrible problem with that being an issue. Now, if Assistant Chief McCabe wants to come up and discuss that, he can, if you would like him to.
Sure, yeah, he's definitely welcome. He's welcome. And also, we have Mr. Gabbard here with us today, and if he has anything to say, if anybody would like to join in, you're more than welcome to. So.
But I think that's one thing we need to take into account is the public safety vehicles, especially if there's an EMS run up there. At least now they can park to the left and cross if they need to cross. But
Sure. Well, at least we can open this discussion, and we don't have to make any decisions. We can just discuss and see what the pros and cons are. So, Mr. McCabe, you got anything to say about this?
Sure. Quatman itself is a fairly busy street. It's utilized as a cut through from Montgomery Road to Carthage, which are both state routes. So I went up and measured after I heard this was going to be placed on this discussion, and Quatman varies in width from 29 feet to 30 feet, basically. And I don't have any particular issues with parking on a double-sided Quatman from Moeller east to Montgomery until you get to where the lanes are pretty much on the curb for that turn lane, or for the eastbound traffic leaving Quatman going to Montgomery. It would be difficult to have double-sided there. I don't think you don't have enough space. But primarily for the fire department's concern would be that area between Moeller and Fenwick. And that's fire department access for the ladder truck to reach those buildings, those apartment buildings. And because of the way those private drives are constructed, it's very difficult to maneuver equipment in there. Typically our fire engines will pull in there. Our ladder truck typically stays out in the street and can reach those two buildings that front Quatman from the street. And we would need that curb line empty. One of the things that people don't understand is that when the ladder truck is deployed, it's normally 8 feet in width, but when the ladder goes up and we have the hydraulic outriggers deployed, it makes it 17 feet in stance. That's a big area. I sympathize because when those houses were constructed in Norwood, people primarily were one car family, and that's predominantly all over Norwood. But as times change, we have multiple car families, and it makes it difficult. Like I said, I really don't have any concerns with parking east of Moeller, but definitively between Fenwick and Moeller, that should remain parking only on the north side of Quatman, in my opinion.
Sure.
Do you guys follow the 2-foot rule with your outriggers as far as 2 feet from the curb? A minimum, keeping it to a minimum of 2 feet from the curb, if at all possible.
It's really difficult in this town. Unfortunately, there's times where we're either in the right of way, we're in the curb.
But if you can try, do you guys try to?
It's not a department standard, no.
Okay.
That's what I was about to ask.
I was just wondering because I know other communities kind of try to keep within that 2 foot
Sure.
from the curb. And that's because if you look at it, 17 feet, you're a little over half the width of the street as it is, and then adding that extra 2-ish feet,
Sure.
you're looking at 19 feet in width. So now you're getting close to your.
Yeah, with a car parked on the opposite side, it makes it a little more difficult for placement.
So that's yours and that's yours. You want one of these two, Bud?
Sure, thank you.
Take a look at that. Sure. Well, I appreciate the input there. Looks like we got a couple guests here with us. You guys have anything to say about this tonight?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak tonight. So I do have an email that presented that was sent by Nicole Taylor to Mr. Braden and I just not very long ago. So I printed it out for the committee just so they could see it. Maybe Mr. Braden, would you mind it being read? Kind of.
Not at all. Not at all.
So yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to do that.
Now, I haven't read this yet. So
Oh no, there's nothing. Yeah, nothing bad in it. Yeah.
I haven't seen it, so if you want to read it, that's,
Yeah. Okay, I'll just say, it says, good evening. I cannot be in attendance tonight. I have concerns with the speeding on Quatman Avenue. I live in the 2300s and have lived here roughly 4 years. I have witnessed cars racing, drag racing, and extreme speeding. We have come close to being T-boned trying to back out because of speeding. In October 2018, a car smashed into our parked truck and flipped over onto its roof. I believe it was a Chrysler 500. The impact moved our Chevy truck roughly 4 feet and caused it to hit our other parked car. Those two vehicles of ours were totaled out. I'm not sure if the surveillance video is still obtainable on our end, but several officers came inside and watched the video of this incident. Parking on both sides would definitely help out with some parking room we have here. The lower part of Quatman has double parking, most likely due to houses being on both sides. When someone has a gathering or small party, we have to park far down on Moeller or take someone else's parking in front of their house. I think the 2300 block of Quatman is wide enough to consider continuing the parking on both sides through the Fenwick Avenue to Moeller Avenue stretch. I don't know what the solution is to the speeding on the street. I don't know if speed humps will help or parking on both sides. Quatman is used as a quick go between Montgomery Road and Carthage. There is one stop sign at Fenwick, and that is quite often ignored. I would like to believe the majority of the speeding isn't Norwood residents, it's the cut-through traffic. I'm sure that residents on this street would agree something needs done. Thank you for your time and having a discussion regarding this concern. And so, Nicole Taylor. So essentially this issue was brought to me a couple of months ago by Ms. Taylor, and she brought it back up to me again at Christmas Town, and I told her I'd bring it up to the council to discuss. essentially, I've also presented you all with a document. It's called Narrow Residential Streets. Do they really slow down speeds? And it's a long document. There's a lot of like heavy data in it, but the gist of it is that on-street parking density significantly affects speed. So essentially, it can slow speeds down by having on-street parking. And there's a bunch of reasons why. So like if you read detailed into the document, it talks about like lane widths and just how when opposing traffic kind of comes at each other, right? Like you kind of have a little, somebody has to kind of yield, or you have to kind of be careful when there is on-street parking because your lane is not completely clear, so you can't go as fast. And so that's one of the reasons that parking is affected. With regards to the concerns, the fire department, I definitely appreciate those. And it sounds like there are, some parts of Quatman that we should definitely probably leave as fire lanes, right? So that the opportunity is there for the ladder truck to get there. I think though there probably could be some, at least between Moeller and Fenwick. I would think that there's at least some stretch maybe that we could look at creating it in between the two buildings. So you have one of the buildings that kind of like a leg of it comes down, and then the other building is like parallel to the street. And I've provided a map of you all too of the area. And I know that again, just it's many of these residents have driveways, but some don't. And again, when they have guests over, that is an issue as well because there's just very little parking. I would just say that I'm hoping that the compromise could be made, but I do like the idea that Assistant Chief McCabe, that he had regarding the parking east of Mueller. I know that that parking lot definitely fills up at times, and it probably could be advantageous to them as well to have on-street parking maybe up until you get to the Quatman's like pull-in, so leaving it clear there and all the way to Montgomery, but potentially you could have some there. But even if you did have on-street parking on Quatman, I think it's very rare. It's not going to be used all that often, and because there's not houses on both sides of the street, it's not going to be completely filled up all the time. So an example of what it could look like would probably be kind of more like what Fenwick is. So Fenwick, you've got parking on both sides of the street, and it does, at some times, there is parking on the car on both sides, so you do kind of have to squeeze through, but it also causes, again, for people not to go 40 or 50 miles an hour. So I'm definitely okay with, even if we can compromise and look at potentially one section, I think it would provide, honestly, a better quality of life for the residents just with the extra parking for them, and then also with just providing some of that street calming effect. So I appreciate your all's time.
Sure. Thanks. Appreciate that. Very enlightening. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that there's some potential for maybe some parking in somewhere there, but it does concern me about the fire truck and so I mean, obviously there's no parking there, and to me it's for a reason. There's other people before us has been in this position, and so maybe they've looked at that and then they have their reasons. So maybe that's just what Mr. McCabe addressed. Do you have anything to say, Mr. Gabbard?
Well, it's being the old guy here. I remember before those apartments, that was a high school. That was Regina High School.
Yes, sir.
So that was another reason that there was no parking on that side was, again, for fire department access to the high school. And now that we have apartment buildings in there, I would agree with the chief that particular block, unfortunately, we need to have that for the ladder truck to be able to pull up at any spot there and to deploy. I do like the fact from Moeller all the way up to probably that driveway that goes up to the Spirit Center, we'd be able to have parking on both sides. And then from that point eastward to Montgomery Road would probably have to be no parking because it becomes a turn lane and things. But and I think by just that additional, that particular block, if people have company, they would still have to come up to Moeller or just past Moeller to park. But the question that I would like for us to start looking at and considering, and this would be a prime example of that, is talking about street calming and how we go about doing that. I mean, do we look at speed humps? But we want to work with the fire department, the police department on those. I know it seems like it's helped over on Williams in front of the school over there. I don't know any statistics. That's just my personal opinion. But if we're going to look at some types of street calming for a street like this, that's an obvious cut through. This would be a prime example of that. Williams was another one, and obviously there's being an elementary school on that street. They decided to do that. But I think that's conversation that we could use to start looking and start discussion on what we could do for street calming, in that particular block. Man, I am the old guy here.
No.
I'm not sure of that. Yeah, you sure?
Oh, I'm sure.
I got something. So, in terms of street calming, I know there's been a big talk about speed humps, and I won't speak for my counterparts in the police department. But the fire department is adamantly opposed to street humps. It's really hard on the equipment. We kind of relegated, we kind of acquiesced to the request on Williams because I think the children's safety is more paramount, and we wouldn't be opposed to speed humps being around most of the schools except for the high school, just because Sherman's a widely traveled road for us. We make a high incident number down Sherman to the nursing homes, and that wear and tear would decimate the trucks. I mean, we all know the condition of our apparatus now. We're lucky to keep what we have on the road. Speed humps are just really, really hard on heavy equipment like that. It's fine for the everyday vehicles. And I'm speaking for my late chief counterpart we talked about this many years ago about placing speed humps throughout the city, kind of like what Cincinnati was trying to do. And he was also adamant against it. I would encourage this administration and council to really consider alternative street calming, basically exhausting your street calming options, and utilizing that as a last resort. One thing I did think of when we're talking about Quatman Avenue is, and I don't know the process, right, but what would it hurt to have a three-way stop sign at Moeller and Quatman? It's in between pretty much Montgomery and Fenwick, so there's a stop sign there, there's a stop sign at Fenwick, and there's a stop sign at Carthage. Slow down and stop, or we're going to put the police up there and do some additional traffic citations, although I know those guys are busy. But
The problem with that is that traffic study. I was inquiring about putting one at Lafayette at Ashland, and Mr. Murphy came back and said that there's only been 2 accidents there last year, and there has to be a minimum of 5 for the state to even do a traffic study to then decide whether it's warranted.
sure.
To put that up, which,
Yeah.
to me seems ridiculous.
Because
but
I even called up to ODOT and asking them, and the biggest thing that he hammered me on was, before you even say it, we frown upon stop signs being put in to slow traffic down.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
That doesn't make sense, does it?
No.
I was gonna say I'd love to jump in. I just had a kind of question maybe through the chair to Mr. McCabe. So I definitely appreciate your comments about exhausting our traffic calming efforts, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity to work with the fire department to definitely do that. And honestly, I think that I think a good compromise, like Mr. Gabbard said, I think let's just try it out between Moeller and the Holy Spirit Center drive, or the drive to get into the Plotman parking, and see how that works. Before any other conversations happen. But I definitely appreciate the safety concern. I think that's a very valid concern. As far as the speed humps, so when you all, I guess you're all, I know that there's the residents on Quatman, on the other side of Quatman, so between Fenwick and Carthage, and on Glenn's side between Fenwick and Carthage. Like when I go door to door, that is like they are hugely concerned on that side too about speeding and cut through traffic. I know that you all have a set protocol for how you all respond, specifically like if you're going to like Mills and Carter, you know, you all go down Montgomery, take a right on Sherman, like, and pretty much every time you go, you have set routes. I'm thinking that like on Quatman, like if you were going down Homer, you would come from Montgomery Road, and probably if you're going, you know, anywhere kind of near Fenwick, you'd probably go down Fenwick. Is that normal?
Or coming down up Carthage and coming up Quatman, just depends on the address.
And not every piece of equipment
Correct.
is the same way.
That's a good point,
Sometimes they split and
because
they
you have to
come in,
attack
yeah.
the extinguisher.
So anyway, you place an address and you put it in the middle of the two streets, you're going to have primarily 3 of the fire apparatus coming up one way and 2 coming in the other way, depending on the availability. So you'll have the engine and the ladder coming in one direction, the second pumper coming in to grab a secondary water source from a different direction. The medic units will, depending on their service ability, one will follow the first 2 and the other one will follow the other engine company.
Okay. So, but on this, like on Quatman though, specifically, like right there, you all probably don't cut completely through Quatman en route to most emergencies that don't happen on that section of Quatman.
No, primarily we will be coming down either Fenwick or Moeller. It's very rare for us to come all the way up Montgomery and hang a left on Quatman.
Okay. So and basically, I was just saying, so potentially, you know, that could mean if we did look at speed humps, it could mean that there would be less of an impact because there's not very often that the equipment goes down that street like that. But I do think that I agree that potentially we look at other options. I mean, there are others, you know, street trees, and there's many other ways that you can try to calm traffic, and so I'm looking forward to exploring that. But yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm definitely good without putting it next to Quatman and next to the apartments for now, and looking at the
I
other
understand where you're coming from, Mr. Bonzel. One thing that, you know, they don't just go up Quatman and down Quatman for emergencies either. You know, they're up there checking hydrants, draining hydrants, thawing hydrants out during the winter. You know, I don't know the situation on the hydrants up there, but there could be 1 or 2 of them up there that freeze every single time, and they have to go up there once a week to thaw it out.
We're missing one at the corner of Quatman and Montgomery, so.
Well, there's an advantage, I guess, or disadvantage.
Yeah.
Was it
How do you miss one?
Was it a traffic crash?
Yeah,
How does that happen?
it was. So the hydrant was struck and it has been replaced. I know it's on the,
Okay.
it's on the list for replacement once they get hydrant funding down at Public Works.
But you know, I mean, I see them with the engine all the time doing those checks. So,
Yeah.
you know, going up and over those speed humps in an engine with a 1,000-gallon tank, 1,200.
No, we run 750 tanks just because
Oh.
we have a lot of water here. We're lucky.
There you go. I'm used to running 1,200, but you know, 750-gallon tank, and that water sloshing as you're trying to go over that, it does a little more than just the
Yeah.
shocks on it.
I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's valid.
Got something to say, bud?
Well, I would like to add too that we're probably not talking about, even close to talking about adding speed humps on every single street. You know, so the chances of hitting it repetitively all the time, you're going down every single street is not likely. So I understand the wear and tear aspect of it, but it's like how often are you down that street all the time?
Well, with those trucks, it's not like a typical car. With those trucks, you know, especially with their older trucks, they're more susceptible to damage very
Okay.
easily. It's not like a typical car.
Getting back to the parking, I have a little slightly different aspect, and I hope that we can the discussion will come up with a plan that will help these residents that are crowded, their parking's crowded. Now, I personally enjoy, and I too remember Regina High School, and the hill there is beautiful, and even with the apartments going down Quatman Avenue without the parking is a beautiful street. It's just the green space, and you know, I think the parking on the other side of the street would kind of inhibit. You know, I enjoy driving down Quatman Avenue. It's beautiful, and so that's another aspect of not that I would love to alleviate the parking issues there for the residents, and hopefully we can come up with something. So it's a beautiful street. So, you know, you're talking parking on the other side and putting some street humps. you know, I really enjoy Quatman. It's really pretty and part of Norwood. So, you know, the questions I had was how many driveways were on that road in between the two Homer and Fenwick, and you know, and the actual implementation of park. You know, if we just say, well, okay, now we can park on the the east side of Quatman. Okay, now we can park there. What types of ramifications for the city? You know, does that make us? I don't know. Does that make us liable for any other reasons? That's something that I have the discussions with the law department. And I was worried about the fire department and their input, and I appreciate that. And also, I'd like to hear what the police department has to say. That's something that I'm kind of curious that what their input would be. And I would say that I also had written down here that there are reasons for that there not to be parking there, and I think we've heard that from the fire department. So I appreciate that. I also so yeah does anybody have anything else to say on that matter? Sure.
I do like Mr. Gabbard's idea of having the parking there east of Moeller between Montgomery to about that driveway area to where it can start to taper down. But the only other concern I have with that is it would have to be some distance away from that Moeller intersection to start the parking, because it does kind of grade in the turn there, and visibility would probably get a little sketchy, I'd imagine. So that's one thing to look at on that when you go forward.
Yeah, that I do know all too well. Every morning trying to get my daughter to school, coming out of there, and I've had my close calls coming off of Homer.
I mean, at least it would open up a little bit of parking and maybe help out a little bit there.
But I do agree. I think that little section, if there was parking there, it would calm the street a little bit, and maybe people like me coming off of Homer wouldn't have those close calls because they would have to. They would have to calm themselves prior to coming up towards that intersection, knowing that there's going to be cars there.
Being able to go
Correct.
both ways at the same time.
Correct.
So therefore, you're going to have to slow down
Right.
and negotiate whatever's coming towards you.
Right.
That's going to help,
Right.
at least in that particular section, and then hopefully, you know, it's not that becomes, you know, Muller becomes the starting point, and then they just fly down or even through that intersection. You know, Ms. Taylor mentions that, you know, that stop sign is often ignored,
Right.
which doesn't surprise me.
Oh yeah.
And there's other ways that you can actually, I mean, I think that I really am excited about the potential for this, you know, for us to kind of implement maybe some different traffic calming things. And it doesn't have to be a stop sign. I mean, it could be, there's many cities like Seattle and other ones that will put like kind of like mini roundabouts in the middle. So essentially, you just kind of navigate, you just kind of go to the right and around it. And so you actually don't even have to completely stop, you know, so it actually kind of helps with that. And if you go forward, if you're going to be hitting rocks or whatever you put in the middle of it. So, you know.
Right. Big boulder.
Yeah, yeah, and you make it the way it's designed so that the fire trucks can get through. I mean, there's just many things that you can do. I'm not saying we'll do any of those specific things. I'm just saying that I think that there's a lot of options, and you know, the previous administration, I don't know how much they really cared about, you know, just quality of life or when it comes to the traffic calming. But you know, I'm excited about, I guess, you know, moving forward here.
Well, I think we're going to be doing more traffic studies throughout, you know, and so, you know, I think when we do those, we need to evaluate. We need to have more research done on traffic calming and different methods of that, because we could probably implement a few different types of calming in different parts of our city. You know, different parts are, the streets are more narrow or wider, that they want to implement things like that. So, you know, these are all things that we need to start thinking about, because we are in a different world than we were 50 years ago when it was a one-car family. You know, it's 2 and 3 and 4 cars, you know, depending on how many kids you got, and if you have cars for each of them. And You know, we have not as much off-street parking. Not every home has off-street parking. So there's a lot of different variables that go into all that. And I think that the street calming is a definitely an area that we need to research and find out different ways that would work.
Sure, Mr. McCabe.
So just doing a quick look over on the old Google Maps, it looks like every home in between, on Quatman, in between Fenwick and Muller has off-street parking ability. With that being said, you know, some are quite short, but everyone has at least looks like have the ability to at least park one car off the street.
That's interesting. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's, so, I don't know if we'll make if we're gonna come to a conclusion tonight. We can, discussion can continue. So,
I would recommend that we do get the police departments,
yes, sir.
you know, what their thoughts are on the same, you know, couple blocks there.
Probably the city administration too.
Yeah, and plus, yeah, the administration to see what their thoughts.
Absolutely. So, yeah, so I mean, ultimately, I would love to have a solution for Mrs. Taylor and to alleviate her parking. I also would tend to agree with our safety services if they say they need that area. So I definitely would consider that, you know, that weighs pretty heavy as far as, you know, when I'm thinking of you know, so I appreciate that input, Mr. McCabe, and so we'll just continue the discussion. And if everybody got anything else to say about that, we'll move on. Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Yep, appreciate it.
You may want to stick around for a minute, Mr. McCabe.
I'll venture it back to the gallery.
We got another issue coming up here. Our second item on the agenda is discussions of traffic patterns on Wesley Avenue, Marion Avenue, and Ash.
Lots of maps today.
Actually, one of them is a street.
I like it. I like visuals.
Let's see, Wesley Avenue, Marion Avenue, and Ash Street. Ash Street. So that's the next item, and I'd like to ask Mr. Gabbard if he has anything to say.
Yeah, I placed this in committee. I'd gotten an email from one of our residents, and he just, it was, it wasn't necessarily a complaint, it was a suggestion. And currently, we have Wesley that runs one-way north from Norwood Avenue, and it runs one way all the way to Highland. Am I correct on that, Mr. Cave? It doesn't go past, it's two-way once you get from Highland to Buxton, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's one way, Wesley is one way north from Norwood Avenue to Highland Avenue. Marion is two-way, and Ash is two-way. The thought was Marion tends to be the shortcut for anybody going up to more or less Harper, Highland, Buxton, Grandview, Indian Mound, and all that area up in there. The whole big mound area. People tend to use Marion because it's a straight shot all the way to Buxton, and then just a jog onto Grandview, and then you're on the Indian Mound. And it helps to bypass Montgomery Road. So the thought is for us to, again, this is going to have to be a traffic study, to maybe consider reversing Wesley to come south, have Marion a one-way north, and have Ash a one-way south. And all three of these are just from Norwood to Highland. Now, my thought pattern on that was, and obviously we would want the fire and police's input on this, and the administration, and a traffic study and all that. But my thought is, there's a traffic light at Norwood and Wesley, and there's a traffic light at Norwood and Ash. So if you're coming south on those to get down off the hill, there's at least a red light there that will allow traffic to be able to turn left or right appropriately. Marion tends to be where people are coming off the lateral, either they're coming east or west, they come to Marion and then they shoot up, and so if it's only headed north, then there's nobody trying to come down to try to turn left and cause traffic that way. Whether we have parking on both sides, all that, is probably additional discussion on that. But I just wanted to throw it in a committee here, and then obviously I guess we could request the traffic study to be done there. I'm not 100% sure about Wesley. I want to say, and speaking with Mr. Breen earlier today, I want to say that back when the Linden Point was being developed, and we eliminated the westbound on-ramp off of Montgomery Road onto the lateral, and we eliminated Carthage from coming in and having that big, huge five-way intersection, that they did a traffic study of how the lateral traffic coming off and on to the Norwood lateral. And with Montgomery Road, I'm pretty sure that's when they made Wesley one-way north, and their thought was that was the way to get people up. It's a smaller street than Marion, and I would say Ash and Wesley are about the same size width-wise. That's a guess, but just from my experience of driving it. Unless there's another reason why that's one way going north.
I know Wesley's been that one way since I was at least in elementary school.
Which was what, 2000?
I appreciate that.
Mr. Gabbard. That was
I appreciate that, Mr. Gabbard.
I apologize.
Oh, man.
And the reason I know that is I used to have a friend that lived there.
Okay, so
And-
then it wasn't a part of that particular thing. I was thinking that's, and that's the only reason. I'm not sure why
And
we ever made just that one street.
I believe at one point, and I don't know when, but Marion was a one-way south
Yeah.
from Highland to Norwood. It might take me a little bit of time to figure out when, but I do know at one point it was that way for North Norwood School.
Yeah, I'm sure you also say,
Yeah.
I bet you it was the school.
That way, that's when it was North Norwood, they had
Yeah.
the one-way each directions
Correct.
for safety.
Yeah.
And
All
then
right, I do remember that.
they switched
recall that now.
They switched Marion, but not Wesley.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, my thought pattern on that was if Wesley and Ash went south, came south because there was red lights there at Norwood Avenue, to allow left or right, and then Marion was the right because most of the people I know that live up on Buxton, Indian Mound area will take that instead of going to Montgomery Road to Indian Mound and up. They'll shoot up Marion and cut up and through there.
Now, I know that if we do a traffic study with a possible temporary adjustment to see how everything goes, I'm kind of curious as to how the traffic flow would be going right or left to go north towards the north end. So what I mean by that is
Turning left off of
how many
Norwood
how many
Avenue.
more cars are you going to have turning left versus going straight up Wesley, or turning right to go up Marion versus going straight up Wesley?
Are you proposing, though, that Marion be one-way north all the way to Buxton or just to Highlands?
Just to Highland. All
Okay.
three of them we're just talking about from
Never
Highland to from Norwood to Highland.
Right.
Sure,
What I-
yeah,
what-
that makes sense.
What I mean is like
Yeah.
if you got people coming off the lateral,
Yep.
how much of the traffic volume are you going to get on Montgomery? Additional traffic volume on Montgomery, or additional traffic volume on Marion, versus what you see right now.
And I think that's where a traffic study would
Right.
heed that. We would also want to probably have public hearing on this
and
for
that-
the people that live on these 3 streets, and even Harper, or even all these streets right here, for all the people to be able to give input, on what their thoughts are. There again, when you make them one way, again, it's a little bit slower because it's only one way. It just causes a better directional, I think. But I just wanted to be able to throw it into this committee to see, and then maybe we can request a traffic study to see what that might look like, if that's possible. And then, what the residents would think if we did a public hearing after the traffic study came back. The traffic study comes back and says absolutely not, that would not work at all, then obviously it would be dropped, but.
Yeah, I know Mr. Braden and I had actually talked or discussed the public forum prior to this meeting, saying, it might be a good idea to get public input in a public forum type area up with those residents, because we were discussing 2 other streets as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think if we start the traffic study and do the public forum right in the middle of it,
Yeah.
why not?
So,
Please,
Mr. Brady, yeah.
please.
So I actually thought coming in here when hearing that we were going to make streets one way, I thought I might be against it because it does create, it's less of that friction, right? So cars can have more free access. However, I think there's also a great opportunity here doing this. I think your logic's great when it comes to the traffic lights on Norwood Avenue. I think that potentially doing this too, we might be able to actually restore or create some on-street parking on Norwood Avenue for residents, because we can take out that turning lane at Wesley. And then also, I mean, you'll have to look at it, but right now, if you look at Norwood Avenue between Wesley and, let's see here, between Marion and Ash, basically there's a center lane there that's basically just blocked off because well, it's no parking everywhere, but there's really wasted pavement there. So if you reduce the ability to turn left onto Ash, then you don't need that turn lane there, and none of those houses have driveways now. So I'm all about creating on-street parking, because one, it protects pedestrians that are walking on that sidewalk and makes it nicer, and then 2, it actually is going to probably help that neighborhood, because who wants to buy a house right now where there's no driveway and there's no on-street parking? In full disclosure,
You have apartment buildings on the corner of Norwood and Marion, and also at the corner of Norwood and Ash.
Right.
Both of those are apartment buildings. I think the reason for that middle part is during rush hour, coming off of westbound 562, that exit there, that does become kind of congested down through there. But you're right. I mean, that's all that.
Right, the traffic study could look at that. And I mean, I'm just saying, I think there's opportunities here to look at that as well, and to try to, like I said, kind of provide some of that parking. Because again, when these houses were, like you all alluded to, when these houses were built, a lot of people were walking everywhere. They were walking down, there's streetcars that were around, there were all kinds of stuff. So, I think it's just a good way to enhance it. So I would definitely support that traffic study, just to look and see
Sure.
what's possible.
Yeah, I know that one dangerous, if you come up Ash and you turn onto Highland, that is a very dangerous intersection. Seen many of wrecks in that intersection.
Yeah.
People get T-boned all the time coming off of Ash onto Highland. People are barreling down Highland Avenue, up Highland, excuse me. And that's a dangerous intersection right there. Many accidents now. However, I know we talked and we talked about I'm curious on how many people are affected by this. Do you know? We talked earlier, and how many people have addressed this, that they have issues with the way that it is now? I'm just curious. And
Yeah, I don't know. I think it might be. I mean, like I said, I've only gotten one email, but as I've talked to some people that use these paths, they kind of like the idea of, it might be better if they were one ways, just to make things more direct and there's less friction of trying to go both ways.
Okay.
But I think right now it's one of those people, they know it's a problem. They know it's an issue, and because Marion kind of, if there's anybody parked on both sides there of Marion, people trying to go up Marion or come down, that becomes a really, really bad bottleneck. And the same thing at Ash. If you're trying to come down Ash to get onto the highway or to Norwood Avenue, or trying to go up, it's a real bottleneck there. But if I think that people that I've talked to kind of like that idea. But I think that it would definitely affect on how you drive and how you get home and how you leave your home.
I think the only thing that I mean, when it comes to mind, when we talk about when we're trying to, reinvent the mousetrap is what kind of my phrase is what I use when other people has done this. And so if you reroute the traffic on these roads, they're going to go elsewhere, and they're going to have those issues in other areas. So I guess what like as smart as I am, other people, others before us has been in this situation, and they made these decisions. So I don't know what they were. So if that's a real issue, we need to get some sort of study now.
And I think when we do the study, we can request several different options.
So when we do these studies, what are we talking about? What kind of studies are we talking about? Are we funding a study? Like what? Curious on what
they evaluate the traffic, how many
ODOT?
cars,
ODOT.
Like the current traffic patterns,
the way the patterns are,
and
and how many vehicles are traveling, busy times. Is there on-street parking? Is there off-street parking? What's used mostly? They evaluate all those.
I understand. You got something, Mr.
I
Bond?
was just gonna say, it would be. Well, I was gonna make a joke about.
Come on,
that. I was
bring
gonna
it
make
on.
a joke about
Bring it
us going out. We just take turns and we'll just count cars. Okay. But no, Mr. Gabbard's exactly right. Whether it's ODOT, sometimes City have JMA will do has done some of the studies I think in the past, or when I've asked about traffic studies, that's who would do some of them. But really, I was at ODOT today with Mr. Zimmerman on a different issue, and the city's really looking to deepen our partnership with ODOT, and I think that ODOT's really willing to help us out. And so I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that. And
So by help us out, does that mean do the study for a large cost, or what?
No. I think potentially like there's going to be opportunities where they might just do the study for us. And I think they've got a manual of local government partnerships. So whether it's there's a many different things, but I think traffic studies are one of them.
Well, the mayor just spoke about it at the last council meeting. Said that in the meeting that Bridget Kelly facilitated with ODOT, that that he was made aware that they do. There's several different free programs that they do. Some of those are traffic studies, and that may be that hey, this year we do X amount of traffic studies, and we do this and we do that, and then next year it's something totally different. I don't know how that works,
Perfect.
but he made mention of that as well.
Good conversation. So
Chief,
I'm
would you have-
curious on the fire department and the police department if they
Do
have
you guys have any thoughts on one-way streets or those particular streets in general?
So those streets in general, in terms of being one-way streets, I have to really look at the response patterns, what we do up there. Traditionally, we're just responding on those roads for incidents on those. We typically use main connectors. So if we're going to Grandview, we come across Buxton, typically off of Montgomery. One-way streets are sometimes problematic in terms of access. I don't foresee any issues on those because they're a lot wider than what we have down the old
Like Lincoln?
West. Yeah, well, West Norwood is when you're driving the ladder truck and you've got clearance like this on the other side, that's never fun. People don't realize that by law they have to be just within 12 inches of the curb, so that eats up roadway real quick. Having previously lived up in the Wakefield area, you're right. There's a lot of times where you're coming off the lateral, to go up Marion and someone's coming down, and inevitably you're playing the stop-start game depending on how many cars are coming down and you're going up. I'd have to really dig into it to see. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any reason why we would be opposed to it.
I mean, emergency-wise, you guys can go the opposite way, obviously.
We tend not to.
Yeah, you
but
try not
yes.
to, but if there's a structure fire,
Yes.
you're going to come in from both angles,
Yes.
and that's not going to be an issue. That's
Yeah.
going to be a moot point. But still, yet the way that you're normally going to do your particular patterns,
Yeah.
it will affect a little bit.
Yeah, and not terribly. I can't think of anything that jumps out and says, "Oh, hold on with that." I think the roads are relatively wide enough for the two-way parking or the one-way traffic with parking on both sides going that direction. Nothing jumps out. Now to the comment about eliminating the turn lane on Norwood Avenue, that sometimes gives us a little heartburn in terms of with heavy volume of flow. In rush hour, that's an access way for us to get to the chemical companies or down to beach. So we'd have to look at that. I'm not saying that wouldn't be an option. I'd be concerned about cutting off that center aisle access way for us because when traffic's backed up and everyone's trying to pull off to the side, that's where we go. But we'd have to look at that. That's my only comment about that.
And just a point of when I was talking about eliminating turn lane, it would be on the streets where you no longer can turn left. It would be that, it would be eliminated on Wesley, where Wesley's now a one way, and then on Ash. So it wouldn't be for eliminating a turn lane for anywhere where they could still turn.
Sure.
So that's just all that was.
Cool.
Sounds good. Yeah. So that answers all the questions I've had. So we can continue the discussion. I mean, sounds like a lot of studies here. So let's move on if we're okay.
Yeah, I would
Please, got something else?
I guess just request. I guess we would just ask request the administration to look at doing a traffic study to see.
In a couple areas that we've discussed tonight. Yeah. I said we go for the whole city
Oh my gosh.
while we're at it.
That's funny. Mr. Braden, I did talk to Mr. Moore today, and I apologize, I don't want to go back to that one topic, but you did ask about liability. So Mr. Moore thought that, the law director thought that we did not need to do a traffic study for parking changes. That's really just a city policy thing like that.
Sure.
ODOT doesn't treat it the same way. So just want to make sure that you kind of knew that, but I know there's still more research to do. But
Sure, I appreciate that. I actually did, I was at the law department today and I spoke with Mr. Gary, and I actually have an ordinance here that I brought with us if you want to take a look at it. But as far as, this traffic, exactly what we can do, and as far as, I believe it's not really up to us. I believe that's the administration, that we can make recommendations and we can fund studies, we can recommend funding, and we can approve funding. But as far as the actual implementation, that's the administration's job to do. So yeah, I appreciate that. So is there anything else? So we'll move on. So to our third item on the agenda is our discussion. Thanks, Mr. McCabe. I appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
So our third item on the agenda tonight is a discussion of a street plan, and it was brought up at the last council meeting that we have a plan moving forward for our streets and infrastructure to maintain and improve. So there is started the discussion, and what I have for you guys tonight, there's some copies over there if you guys need them, is what I did was print off, this is a 2017 street plan that the Republicans put together. And so it's a little old, and basically we can look through it, and this is a pretty extensive maintenance plan and resurfacing, and it's the whole thing. So it's funding, resurfacing, and maintenance after the fact. And I think it's a pretty involved plan. But like I said, it's a couple years old. This is not something new. This is just an example that I've brought to you guys so we can take a look at and start the discussion. Now, as far as plans go, we've been talking about a whole lot of plans tonight. You know, discussions and planning, and that's great. I believe perfect planning is exactly what this city needs. So, and that's what we're going to achieve for. So when you're talking streets, I'm really proud of our last administration and the work that we've done. And you know, in 2019, I've got 4 streets here, maybe 5, that we have repaved and we have redone, and we should be very proud of that. So, and I'm also looking at another 5 to 6 streets that have been approved for 2020. And if you guys want to know what them are, I have them written down here. So, like I said, in 2019, we did Section, we did Forest, we did Cypress, and we did Highland. Am I missing any? I think I've got one more here that I'm missing.
I don't think that we did Cypress, so I think that...
No?
No, I think that was one that, I mean, many of those residents want it to be done, but I mean, when I was walking Cypress in October, November, I think it was...
That's not done?
I don't remember us as council last year approving
okay.
it.
Well,
But no worries,
that.
I just wanted you to know. I mean, but
Well,
you're
I
Once
appreciate
again,
that.
section
Section Forest Highland.
And then the ones that I have that have been approved by us, and I'm very proud of this, Mr. Bonzel, and you should be too. Indian Mound, Sheridan, Wakefield, Tower Park, and possibly Parmalee. Or maybe, I'm sorry, Tower Park would be the possible one.
Yeah.
And then Parmalee. And I got a question mark. I'm thinking I might miss one, but that's good enough for discussions today. I've kind of looked through our funding available, and fund number 2, I believe, we have $655,000. Is that correct? You got that up?
I do. I mean, right now, as of...
For capital projects, that is.
Yeah, as of 1/31, the ending balance is $888,000. So...
Okay, for some reason I've got capital projects as 655, and that has that fund been changed? I'm hearing that fund has been changed to, what was your number, Mr. Bonzel?
I mean, currently $888,000. I mean, I can talk a little bit about the fund if you'd like me to.
Sure,
about
you're absolutely
just the work
can.
that, yeah. So, when Mr. Braden and I joined Finance Committee 2 years ago, Fund 2, the Street Maintenance and Repair Fund, it was used to essentially, it's paying public works employees. It was doing road salt, street lights. Street lights are $160,000 a year because we don't have LEDs, so they're really expensive. And then there were some various just street, patching stuff. And so essentially the last council, Mr. Braden and I, when we were on Finance Committee, we basically said we really want that fund to be only for capital projects. So we took out all that other stuff, and we literally put in the fiscal recovery plan, capital projects was what it was. The funds were allocated for. They couldn't be used for anything but that. And so, instead of us using all $600,000 a year, it started saving up. And then with last year on July 1st, we had a I think 10.5 cent gas tax increase. So that's given us about $300,000 more a year. So essentially for this year, Mr. Braden, for the street fund, the city will have probably about 1.5 or so million that they'll be able to spend on street repaving projects. And that doesn't even, I'm pretty sure that the Indian Mound stuff is already encumbered. So I think that it's even, without that, I think there's still like it's like 1.3 or 1.4 million.
Wow.
So, and that's just because we were being very conservative the last couple of years. I do wish we would have gotten more projects done in the last council term, but the good thing is that there's money for it now. And so I think it's I'm looking forward to hearing how your committee figures out, or recommends to the administration on, just ways that we can make sure that money's spent correctly and that it's done right. But yeah, about 1.3 1.4
I
million.
appreciate that, and I appreciate your job on finance at that last term. Great. I mean, I am so proud of that, and you should be too. So
Thank you, Mr. Britton.
I really am. This is really something great. I have other public service announcements that has to do with the So what I have written down is that Indian Mound resurfacing will be taking place in August and September. And late summer, it's going to be a big deal. And it's going to be lots of work and lots of disruptions. But it's going to be worth it. You guys got anything? You guys got anything? Did I didn't
Not
pass
yet.
you up, did I? Cool. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. Also, we also have updates. There's so engineering has found problems with the blacktop on Highland Avenue, and a few areas will be redone. So that's not good news, but it is good news that they are on top of it, and I think that's attributed to this administration and their checks and balances. I really believe that. So we're told that there's a few issues and they're going to be redone, and they are reviewing Section Avenue and the work on Section, because we've had some issues there of some people saying that there's issues. I personally think it's pretty nice, but we have some issues there that are being reviewed, and we're waiting on that to come back. So that's pretty important, and I'm proud of that too. So we all should be. So getting back to the plan, does anybody have any comments on what I got in front of you? Now remember, this is 2017. The numbers might not be correct. We need to adjust, and this is just a preliminary discussion.
Well, I like this first part. First, admit there's a problem. There's a problem. We did that just now.
Yes.
Amen. I do like this plan. Some of the things I'm reading a little ahead while you're kind of explaining. I knew about the timeline of the streets thing from our meeting with JMA and the mayor about Elm Avenue. I don't think you got to it yet, but one thing I really want to point is this: evaluate and rate every street. I think that's going to be huge, because one of the questions I do have is, in the last council meeting we talked about, how we pick the streets and how are they picked, and I asked about why is it just all up there, and I think Mr. Bonzo was saying that it's kind of easier to keep them going, keep them moving after they're done with one street. So what I would like to know is, I don't know if you've been able to look any further, but how we go about picking where we start repaving.
From experience with other communities, JMA, now he may know different, be working closer with them over the last couple of years, but where I used to work, JMA had a deal with them that they would evaluate all the streets for free because they were going to be bringing in the work. They were going to be bringing in the job
I like that.
and
Yeah.
bringing in the money. So JMA was evaluating the streets for free for them, and essentially that evaluation would come back with the business of getting the job
Yeah.
for that community.
Yeah. So is that something that?
So I'm pretty sure that's probably similar to what they do everywhere else, and if it's not, it's something we need to investigate to find out how we can get into that kind of deal as well.
Yeah. Because my question would be, instead of us just saying, "Hey, I like this street, let's do that," are we asking residents, or do we have like a streets board of people where they come and tell us what's bad? I'm speaking of this as a newbie here. What do we do, and how do we go about it? Is it somebody like JMA evaluates them and tells us, "Hey, these streets are real bad. These should probably get done before others," or how do we go about this?
Well, I got a few comments on that. We do have a record that we could go by that. If there's an issue with your street, if you say you have a pothole that comes up, or if you have something that you generally would call public works, and it report the issue, and whether or not they get to it in a timely fashion, so we should have some sort of record on how many calls for every street at Public Works. I don't know how long they keep their records. So, when you're talking about plans, and I'd love to have a plan and another plan for this and plan for that, and just depending on what types of money we're looking at spending on. But here's my, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here. You know, because I like to look at both sides here when they're talking about, I don't like to be one issue, one-sided here. So if, let's say last year we did 5, 6 streets, right? This year, I got 5 or 6 on the board. If we do that again next year, if we do that again the year after, that's pretty good, man. That's pretty good. I mean, that's not, in my book, that's swinging a bat, man. So, what I believe is more important is that we have a plan going forward to keep these streets that we're paving. The maintenance on these streets, that they don't go bad. Because our streets are bad. They're rough. And I understand about people coming to us and saying, hey, what about my street? I get that. I understand that. And I want every resident to know that we feel for them and their roads. We want them all done. And I think this proves it. 5, 6 last year, 6 this year. And if we continue that pace, this problem is going to be solved. I think we need to continue. We need to focus on saving our streets that we're doing in maintenance, a solid maintenance plan. And I think this administration is serious about this. So that's where I'm at. Instead of throwing a bunch of money at studies and things like that, if we're doing what we're doing, man, we're on the right pace. So that's where I'm at. I'm gonna. Somebody else got some say.
Well, I mean, I'll defer to your committee members first.
So you're talking about 5 this year, 6 last year, or vice versa. I might have heard that wrong, but and it's sweet. We're getting stuff done. I like that, but I think it would be better off for us as not only a committee but a council and administration to kind of have an idea going forward what streets we're looking to attack, rather than, well, I don't know, maybe we'll get 5 of them done. Probably it's about our average. You know, something where we can tell the people we know, hey, these streets have been done. These streets are about to get done. So you know, even when we're just talking to our neighbors or something like that, we're like, hey, these streets, it's coming over here next year, or the year after that, we're hitting this area.
Right.
And these streets, because one of the things we're doing with our parks thing, we're trying to do, we're creating an inventory tool, an audit tool, to where we have our parks listed, and there's list parks and streets. But I think it would be a good idea to get with JMA, like Mr. Tracy was saying, like to see if they would help us evaluate the roads and put them kind of in a priority list or something that we have that we can look at to say, all right, these are the high value streets here that we need to do now. And then so on down the list. And obviously the ones we just redone would be at the bottom of the list. But I think it'd be very valuable for us to have that. Because I'm looking here and how this is old, but it's about $120,000 to do a 2-lane road that's a mile long. And it says Norwood resurfacing costs would be $8,520,000, which I'm going to guess that's probably more expensive now, maybe with the state of them, or it might be less since we've done several since then. But just going forward, I think it would be very valuable to have that tool to go off of, so we kind of know what we can do or what streets are bad. Maybe we can say, hey, let's do 7 this year because we got the money and we got 7 that are really, really bad. You know, I think it would just help us going forward.
To kind of piggyback off Mr. Couch there, again, going back to a former employment, what they were doing was they were putting out onto their website what streets were being done, what streets were done in a previous year, and what streets were done are going to be done in the future. So they would have a list for those residents to be able to look at. I think if we can get something together once the administration's put together the way they're put together, maybe get a spreadsheet that is a PDF on the website that has every street listed, what year it was paved, and the expected life of that pavement. Typically 20 years if they're not cut into. That way the residents can see it and say, okay, my street might get to around this year based on a JMA evaluation.
That's great. In a perfect world, I understand that. I totally understand that. And I would hope that we could put something like that together. Mr. Gabbard, can I ask you something?
Sure.
I believe that a study like this has been done.
When I was on council before, I believe that Mr. Gears had a priority list, an evaluation done, and that would have been done in the early 2000s. Obviously, our streets are probably a lot worse than that. We do need to have probably that done by somebody. And so we have an idea, so if we have X amount of streets that are, F, they're really bad, they gotta get fixed. And then, the better streets as they go up. Well, as we look at those and we try to cluster them in areas. Now, it would be nice to try to rotate that around each year. We're in a different ward. But, like I said at the last council meeting, with this, water survey that's going to be done, we need to make sure that we look at that list and it gets coordinated with the water list of what's going to be tore up, which streets are going to be tore up. And if we've got a list, maybe 3 of those streets are on the same water list, that those lines are really bad and they got to be replaced. And then, that we could coordinate those. And the same thing is reaching out to Duke and say, hey, what do you have? That way we're not tearing up our streets after we get them paved. We can try to get everything done in that same year. Let Duke and Water go through and handle their stuff, and then we come in and have the paving done. But as long as we have priority lists or lists of what needs to be done, then we can look at all those and coordinate those schedules. But I'm pretty sure, getting back to your original question, I'm pretty sure that there was one done when the past administration first came into office. So,
Mr. Thompson's joined us. Thank you for, appreciate that.
Sorry.
No apologies needed.
You had to work later.
Have you been listening at all, or maybe would you like to add anything?
I haven't, but I do know that because in our last committee, Streets Committee, we had asked to have a similar study done. And I remember when researching that, it had been, I think, 10 years since the prior one had been done, and that would have been almost 2 years ago. So even if there is one that exists, it's so far out of date, it's not good.
Well, what about the records at Public Works? I mean, I'm not against a study. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is, I'm not against a study. I am against throwing a whole bunch of money at it instead of fixing one of our roads.
Right. Yeah.
If you really want me to be honest. So, but a study sounds great. And, if we're getting 25 calls for this street, guess what? That sounds like a high priority. So, and I would hope that before we do a street, that we address the underground problems.
Yes.
I certainly would hope that.
If I may.
You may.
Sorry. I'm like, I've always supported the idea of a study. I know that it can be costly, but I think a good example is like we just had Forest done last year. That was 2 blocks worth of street that had to be taken up, cleared down to the road bed, drainage and things put in for that 2 blocks. That was roughly, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was about $800,000 to do that 2 block length when you have to tear up an entire road bed. Compare that to Highland that just got done. The entire length of Highland, tell me, I think it was around 180K to do the entire length. That's because you didn't have to tear up the entire road bed because we caught it early enough. Doing a study, what we'll do is it will identify those roads that are too far gone, that need to have the entire thing done up, but it will also help us identify those roads that are on the edge of passing over into, the cost goes up exponentially when you have to tear up the whole thing rather than just redoing it. So I think the study, what it can do is help identify those roads that are right on the edge of going from something that is serviceable at a lower price range versus something that's going to need a higher thing. Now, of course, you're going to want to coordinate that with the other infrastructure needs, but that's where I think the value in spending the money in on a study does, is because it helps inform the most at-risk roads that we currently have. Everybody's going to tell you that their roads aren't any good. You can't just
Sure.
leave it up
I
to.
appreciate that, absolutely.
That's why I think you need to have a study.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the reason why that's the reason why we are having this discussion, so that we can decide whether or not it's meaningful and our monies are spent for, and I think that's a great point. Yeah.
And that's kind of why I think that we need to request the administration, somebody, to contact JMA and find out if there's a way for them to do it without cost to the city and grade these roads. Because what they'll do is they don't just go out and go, yeah, there's 10, 12 potholes here, that's going to be an F. There's 8 there, so we'll mark that a D. They'll actually go out and test the roadway itself.
I've got a comment for that, because that sounds great. That sounds absolutely fantastic. But now I could be wrong. Okay, I'm a smarter man than me has been here, right? So, but when these projects come available, they have to go out for bid. We can't just say you get the project, so you do the study. We have to put them for bid. By law, we have to put them out there, and we have to go. Well, we don't have to go with the lowest bidder, but I mean, let's face it. We want to go with the quality of the project, but they have to be out for bid. So will these people just be willing to do that?
You talking about like actually doing the roadway itself, or JMA doing the study?
Oh yeah, I mean the study. So I thought I thought your comment was that they'll do the study if they get the work.
No. They're going to get the work anyway, because they're working with us. So if we go to JMA and say, hey, look, we need somebody to come out and redo our roadway. They're going to go out and they're going to ask for the bids. And then they're going to come back to us and say, okay, these are the bids we got from these companies. Who do you want to go with?
Oh, okay. That
JMA is a consulting company, so what they were doing with the last municipality was they're still getting their money's worth. They're still getting their money worth, even doing that study for free. They're still getting what we're paying them.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that. I was misunderstanding there, so appreciate that. So yeah, anything else to add? Does anybody have anything that maybe that we didn't? Like I said, these are preliminary discussions. Nothing. No, we're not going to sit here and we're not going to, build Rome tonight. So
I will say that maybe I probably should have read this while I was campaigning, or somebody picked my brain and took what I wanted to do, because if you read through this, it says right there, an ordinance for curb-to-curb restoration. I believe that was one thing that we discussed in our law committee meeting.
We stole that from you.
So I think maybe either this was updated during my campaign,
Well,
or I just may not have read it. And
this was our idea. That's all I'm saying. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, that's fine. So yeah, anybody have anything else to add? I mean, please, Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. So, no, I think you all are doing great work. I think the debate's good between, like the street plan or using that money for streets. I actually personally don't have knowledge of JMA, and I don't know for sure. I mean, the only interaction I ever had with JMA was through the last city administration, and there were times. So I don't know what they'd be willing to do. I do know that when we'd asked Mr. Gears about doing like a comprehensive street study about, looking at every street, which ones exactly what Mr. Thompson said are on that edge of needing, and I think, or Mr. Gabbard, I think might have alluded to that too, but are on that edge of needing repaving where you could save money by not doing the full, depth replacement. So I think there could be some value there. One of the things to remember, so we talked about the amount of money that we have thanks to the previous council, really putting the foot down when it comes to the street fund and ensuring it's only capital projects. I still don't know if that's really going to be enough total. And so, I'd like to make sure that we, think about as we look at other funding priorities in our general fund. I think potentially we might want to have our general fund contribute to maybe a couple $100,000 a year or something into street repaving, because it may not make it in this current financial plan, but we really should look at it for the future, because in my opinion, I just don't think the voters are going to approve a tax increase when the city's getting, our general fund budget's like $24 million a year. I don't know if they're going to want to vote as a tax increase, even though, we could make sure that money goes to streets. So I think we got to do everything we can to protect the general fund as well, so that we can use that for stuff. And then I know that Elm Avenue was mentioned. Of course, before that gets repaved, there's a lot of stuff that's going to have to get done there. If the general fund's not protected, then and all that money gets spent up in increased personnel, then one of the issues we're going to have is we won't have money to do that project. Like that, literally, those people are going to be there for another 20 years without any remedy or any help if we don't have money in the general fund to do it. So just encourage your committee. I won't be here every meeting, but I just encourage your committee to really think about that as we look to pass the financial recovery plan potentially by the end of March and ensure that the voice of the streets and the voice of Elm Avenue don't get missed enough. So thank you.
That's a very, very good comment. And I agree with that. That's something that our general fund can help our street. I like that. I really do. So, and I really believe that's something that we need to look into. So, pretty good discussion. That's why it takes all of us to really come up with something and have something concrete so we can take to our constituents. So, anybody have anything they want to add? I appreciate you guys coming tonight. Sure.
But so Mr. Boswell was talking about, residents not wanting like a tax levy, and that, and I get that. I honestly do think that we need to do stuff first before we end up even thinking about something like that. We have to show them something. We have to put together some sort of plan, even if it's just asking JMA to help us out and see if they'll do that, or if it's just us trying to figure out a way going forward for the next year or two on what roads we want to do, like conversation like this. I think they need to see us doing stuff like that first before we even ask them for anything more. But funding and how we're going to fund this is definitely a concern of mine and something I would like to delve into, like grants.
Let's open that up. Let's talk one more subject, because we do have. There's a subject in here of funding inside and outside resources.
Yeah.
You want to go over that real quick. So, our street is maintained and repaired and managed through 3 funds as well as outside sources. And the funds are the streets M&R fund, which this says O2, but if I'm correct, they changed that O2 to our general fund, I believe, 010852. So that's what I believe. So and then we have our state highway fund, which is 03, which is our second fund that we are funding our roads through. And we also have our permissive tax fund, which is 05. So there are 3 funding avenues right there. And the revenue for the funds are primarily gasoline excess taxes, licensing fees, and trucking fees. And the outside sources currently being utilized are the Community Development Block Grant, which is CDBG, and which is available on a 3-year cycle, and the Ohio Public Works Commission, OPWC, which offers matching grants and loans. So, and then this goes on to delve into each fund and what we do out of each one. So it looks like there are 3 separate funds that we are using for our streets. And also, there are 2 outside entities that are helping us as far as grants and other monies. So matching grants, and so there is there's a place in that plan that you have in front of you for funding and how we fund and funding in the future. So I wanted to mention that just because you brought that up. That's a great point. So. Does anybody want to comment on that, or can we close this meeting?
Well, I do know that, something like, let's just say Montgomery Road would probably cost a little less than what people would expect, mainly because we should be working with the state and the federal government for Montgomery Road. Seeing as it's a federal highway and a state highway, we will be getting money from them to do anything along Montgomery. That's beautification, that's traffic calming, that's street repair, whether it be resurfacing, whether it be base up. So, we need to utilize resources like the state and the federal government for something like Montgomery Road if we want to look at street calming, maybe putting in an island, beautification, putting in trees, shrubbery, something like that, I mean, we look at Pleasant Ridge. Cincinnati did not pay $788,000. I think that's what the cost was for Montgomery Road up there. Cincinnati did not pay $788,000 to resurface Montgomery Road up there and create new lanes. The state and the federal government paid most of that.
I think that's a great point, and also, I believe that there are other areas, not just Montgomery Road, but we can also get matching funds from these grants for other areas in
Correct.
here. So I believe
Correct.
we just did one, I can't remember where it was right here close, but there are matching funds out there for all areas of Norwood. So we need to be looking forward to those, absolutely.
We need to have our hands out.
Yes, we do.
Yeah,
So
something I
let's-
haven't seen in years.
So this starts a discussion, and it's been very, very good discussion, and I appreciate everybody being here, and I appreciate, Norwood is lucky to have people that care enough to show up to committee meetings, that they're not on committees, and I just commend you for that, and I appreciate everybody's involvement here. So I'd offer anybody else to have anything else to say. All right, let's close the meeting. Thanks.